You, Mr. Daniels, for your gracious and mercifully brief introduction. I am from the west side of the D. What an honor it is to be here tonight. President Mo, a gracious and gentle spirit and remarkable leader in higher education, to Ms. Poole, who offered the invitation to come here today from the President's office, to the remarkable students whose diligent and considered action in the face of virulent opposition has set a tone of forceful but fair negotiation, and the attempt to make this particular institution all that it should be. I'm honored to be here tonight in the presence of one of my dearest friends of long standing, Professor Dwayne Michael Cheers, who is a remarkable intellectual artist, photojournalist, and raconteur, and many others who I've seen over the space of these few hours that I've been here, Professor Will and others that I just met, and the wonderful students at lunch. This evening we are here to confront a recalcitrant, stubborn problem, and that is the issue of race, not only in America, but more specifically here on the campus of San Jose State. This, of course, as paid tremendous and eloquent testimonial by the statue of John Carlos and Tommy Smith, is a campus that has historically embraced difference, celebrated courage, articulated a sense of stability in the midst of chaos, and pushed forward, even through controversy, toward goals that subsequently will be embraced by all. The topic of my reflection tonight is, are we post-racial, or is racism still a problem? Now, on the one hand, lest you think that I am ill-equipped to express myself or to address this issue by believing that I have not just heard the litany of woes and ills that characterize this institution in the present, let me say that question is framed so that you and I could engage in a conversation, think critically in dialogue about a serious issue, and see if we can't make us all uncomfortable with the well-worn truths, the shop-worn verities, and the platitudes that we express in the face of our American identity, where our credo is e pluribus unum, out of many one. And yet the reality is that in America we have not often celebrated to the degree that we should the varieties and differences of peoples who constitute our American scene. On the one hand, many people thought with the election of Barack Hussein Obama that this nation had moved beyond its paralyzing and poisonous racial atmosphere, that we had somehow rejected the premises of racism and embraced instead a colorblind, race-neutral future where all people who desired to participate in our society would be granted that privilege without fear that their skin color or their pigment would contradict or somehow subvert their potential participation. So some people believe that now that we've got President Obama, what more do you want? Now that we have put him into office, racism has been resolved. Well, we can tell by the sometimes bitter treatment of President Obama that racism hasn't even stopped in regard to him. I am not suggesting that anybody who raises a critique or advances a vigorous criticism of the president is somehow racist. That would be ludicrous, because my own criticisms would therefore be subsumed under that rubric and assumed to be racist. All of us should have vigorous viewpoints and powerful insights about whoever occupies the ultimate space of political power in America. And yet, Can we really deny that so much of the animus that has been directed toward President Obama has been racially driven, whether conscious or not, whether deliberately or not? Even some of the opposition of our brothers and sisters on the far right, part of the Tea Party and the birther movement, who questioned the legitimacy of the president's status as an American citizen, must acknowledge that some of the racial elements that are present in their criticisms have to either be extricated, extirpated, or at least acknowledged to be what they are. It is not that, again, that we cannot be critical of this particular figure, and I begin with him because it is with his presidency that the very notion of the post-racial was advanced. We must acknowledge that President Obama has had a rough time of it from certain elements in our society because he doesn't fit the mold. He doesn't color within the lines of traditional American identity. He doesn't play the game according to the very standards of those who have evinced race as the basis of judging other human beings. Here is a man who, with extraordinary gift and eloquence and power and a fascinating preoccupation with even-handed application of identities and ideals of America to the broader populace, here's a man, despite being a very balanced and fair and just and non-angry black man, here is a man who has tried to be fair and just and balanced, if you will, a Fox News kind of president, at least by credo. And so President Obama himself has endured assaults and attacks. He has endured vicious and nasty verbal assaults. He has endured some of the most acrimonious times that have been visited upon any president in the United States of America. And I begin with him because if he is not a black man who can be liked by America, scarcely one can be invented or created or born. And I say this because if he is the litmus test of our advance, and we must be fair, those who said that America had come to a post-racial period said so because of his election. We must now also acknowledge that the rejection of him and the repudiation of him predicated upon pigment, a kind of pigmented preoccupation with his skin, a kind of pigmentosis, an obsession with, conscious or not, that a black man has ascended to such a degree of power that it upsets and turns topsy-turvy the very ideals and notions of power in America. But it is even more complicated than that. We have believed, some of us, that the election of one man has somehow changed the course of American history. And to be fair, the election of President Barack Obama does signify an extraordinarily powerful leap forward in race relations in America. Many African American and other people said, "This is a day I thought would never come." My own mother in her mid-70s said she never believed she would see the day that a black man would darken the Oval Office, that a black man would ascend to the heights of American power and become the chief executive officer of America, Inc., that never in her lifetime would she see a black man walk down Air Force One and embrace his black wife and his two black children, and together with their dogs walk off into the sunset. Now, true enough, when he walks down Air Force One, he got a little swag. He's got a little flavor with it. He doesn't dispel all stereotypes. He does play basketball after all. A kind and gentle man, a man who seeks not to upset the apple cart, but in seeking not to upset the apple cart, perhaps has inadvertently done us damage insofar as he has not often spoken on an issue about which he is eminently qualified to speak. It would be akin to having Michael Jordan as president but can't speak about basketball, or the greatest of all time, Kobe Bryant. Stop your hatred, stop it right now. Stephen Curry is coming, slow down. And so, if this man, President Obama, wrote as he did, and I would argue that is the case, one of the most affecting and powerful memoirs of race, struggling with what it meant to be a black person in America, struggling with his own racial identity because he was biracial. He is, of course, the inheritor of both white and black parents and genes and societies and social structures. Here, after all, is a man who understands what it means to be caught betwixt and between, not white enough for those who failed to recognize his white ancestry and not black enough for those who did acknowledge that he was a contender for his black identity. Contender, I say, because he wasn't born with that privilege of being assumed and presumed to be sufficiently black. He had to work his way inside of blackness, and therefore he had to learn a bit more, argue a bit more vigorously, study a bit more with a great scrutiny the ideas and identities of black America so that he could stand proudly within that group. And so here was a man who learned it the hard way. He earned his way inside of blackness. He read Malcolm X and Du Bois. He struggled with Taylor Branch's sweeping epic of American history in the King years. Here was a man who wrote Dreams from My Fathers, an eloquent, poignant, piercing, self-critical, occasionally self-deprecating memoir that tells the truth about the struggle to come to maturity as a black human being with biracial pedigree and ancestry. Why should he not be able to share that with the nation? Why should not a man who has so eloquently articulated his ideas and visions of America be able to tell us what it is that's on his heart? One of the major reasons is because we have believed with his election that we are done with race, been there, done black. And so, post-racial is an ideal that he himself has suggested is not one worthy of our pursuit. President Obama said, slow down with the post-racial discourse and dialogue, because the election of one black man, himself, would never betoken that America was now done with race. The president was too sharp, too insightful, too perspicacious, too knowledgeable to understand or believe that somehow his election would rid us of race, and yet some people want to be rid of race because they want to do it on the cheap. They want to figure out a way that by hiring a black man and putting him in the Oval Office in a place we shall never darken or touch, that somehow we've resolved ourselves of the gritty and bloody and nasty and messy issues of race, that we are now good, we're fine, the compact of the nation is powerful, the resolution of our differences has come, and now America indeed is e pluribus unum, out of many one. Thomas Jefferson's ideals, Benjamin Franklin's dreams, Alexander Hamilton's aspirations are now fulfilled. The founding fathers stand on tiptoe, glancing back across the corridor of history to embrace this singular figure. And yet, with Obama in office, tremendous racial verities, truths ring hollow and sometimes are neglected. Despite his ascent and his success, and the beauty of the American soul that revealed itself for having the desire and the willingness to follow through on that desire to see this extraordinary man in the White House, that America really doesn't really want to talk about race. And that includes most people in the nation. And the president has acknowledged that to be the case and therefore treads quite lightly, if at all, on that terrain. The president knows that if he says anything about color, he is immediately checked. If he suggests that race continues to be a problem, he is immediately seen as a race baiter and a divisive figure. This is a bit of legerdemain, a kind of trickery that is deployed by opponents of critical and balanced racial discourse and dialogue to blame the very people who point to the problem as the causes of the problem. The very people who acknowledge the racial chasm are themselves said to be the reason for the racial chasm because they keep talking about the racial chasm. It is as if somebody possessed of a perilous disease is blamed for creating the disease because that person wants to acknowledge the existence of the disease. If a doctor who analyzes and who then tests you determines that you are ill, the doctor is not the problem, the disease is. The doctor is there to help bring healing to the body. And so our American body politic is in need of healing. And many of you can be apothecaries or physicians assistants or physiatrists or anything you can do to help out a sick person in America. You are enabling the process of healing to occur when you are able to acknowledge that a problem exists. And so tonight, I hope we have come here with the recognition that we must face foursquare, fully, in the heart of the matter, in the teeth of the matter. We must come fully to grips with the reality of the racial differences and divides that exist so we can get to the racial cooperation that is necessary. President Obama's inability to speak about race does not occur in a vacuum. Gore Vidal, the late great critic, said, "We live in the United States of amnesia." I would add that Barbra Streisand has often provided the theme song. What's too painful to remember, we simply choose to forget. Now, I realize a lot of y'all are young and you don't know who Barbra Streisand is. Twerk, Miley, twerk, twerk, Miley. I hear you, Future. Get her to working. So what's interesting, that's for the young people, don't even worry. What's interesting is that we live in this state of amnesia because we are addicted to forgetfulness. We believe that we got where we are today because America was good and wanted to do the right thing. No, it was coerced. No, it was forced. No, this nation had a division. First, brother against brother and sister against sister in the Civil War. And then after slavery, about which that Civil War was fought despite the historical revisionism that has clogged the arteries of our clarity.